Cadillac has announced the end of the XT6, which means the only 3 rows available are with an Escalade in the name. Or at least that was the case until this. And this is the 2026 Cadillac Vistiq, which is essentially replacing that XT6, which means internal combustion out and electric in. But it doesn't just slot into that same position, it really moves this brand forward as a fully electric premium car brand. And this is gonna do a really good job of that. But Nick and I are outside of Detroit to get our first time behind the wheel here. So come join us as we look at Cadillac's newest, smallest 3-row. A strong grille has always been a staple in the Cadillac lineup, and there's no difference here, except for it's a more modern take, because out is a grille and instead is just the front end. But we still get that shield design, and instead of actually having grille slots, we just sort of have a textured look to it. But this is so wide, it makes this car feel nice and low. And the highlight here is not that centerpiece, it's actually the surrounds, because we have incredible lighting, not just in this Vistiq, but the rest of the Cadillac lineup, especially when it comes to electrified models. And that waterfall headlight design, the one that greets you when you walk up to it, I think is fantastic. But when it comes to this front end, most of those trims are gonna look pretty much the same. The biggest difference is whether it's a lighter theme or a darker theme. This one is the sport model, so it's gonna be a little bit darker until you get to the platinum, and that gets a little bit of a different treatment here on the very lower end of this front end, and that looks absolutely fantastic, but you do have to pay for it.
If you happen to have been shopping for an XT6, I'm sorry to say that it's no longer available, and in place this comes in. But unfortunately, it's not the same replacement. It's not a one-to-one comparison because this vehicle is quite a bit larger. It's going to be about 7 inches longer in overall length and 8 inches longer in the wheelbase, making this one of the larger SUVs in the 3-row luxury segment. And when you cross-shop against something like an R1S from Rivian, an EX90 from Volvo, or even a Hyundai Ioniq 9, this is going to be the longest example of those other competitors. Now, in terms of wheelbase, it slots somewhere right in there, but it does that for a reason. It needs that large stance, that really aggressive road presence to give you that luxury ride that you're expecting out of a pretty relatively expensive vehicle, and that is from Cadillac, so you expect the most luxury. Now, in terms of creature comforts, you are going to get all of the premium technology as standard: 360 camera, parking sensors, all of your driver assist out on the road. But if you wanted to go for something that's just a little bit more visual, like your wheels and tires, here on the Sport, 21-inch wheels come as standard. Now, if you go to the premium luxury or to the top trim platinum, you can get 22s as standard or optional 23-inch wheels, so you can make sure that your vehicle looks as good as it rides.
If you're like me, you couldn't help but notice that this is a pretty squared off back end, and actually it's really reminiscent of the Escalade itself. I would call this sort of a scaled down model, and I appreciate that because I've always loved the look of the Escalade. I just didn't need as large of a vehicle. But with that Escalade type look, we also get a very flat back here, and it's sort of a simple elegance. There's not a whole lot going on except for that lighting that I mentioned earlier. We have great lighting up here in the top of the tailgate. We also get some down in the lower end, and we get a little bit running across the middle. Like I said, lots of lighting. Down below, again, fairly simple, obviously no exhaust tips, but when you get the Platinum model, you do get a different bumper. And again, I really like the way that bumper looks, but it's a pretty penny more than what we have here. But the reason you're getting the 3 rows is because you have people and things. Go ahead and press that Cadillac logo here. And once this hatch opens, you'll see that we're a little bit limited when it comes to space, but that's something that always happens when you get a smaller 3 rows. You have to start making some compromises. As you can see, we've got a couple bags back here. All of these are carry-on or smaller, but when we take that out, you can see there's not a whole lot of room behind the seats here. There's pretty good leg room throughout. If we fold these seats down, we get 43 cubic feet, but we did find a bit of an issue. As you can see, the headrests are gonna fold down, but they don't fold down until they get to the point where they've kind of already hit those seats. So what we have to do is slide this seat forward a little bit, and then we can get to the point where it will release itself and then fold itself down. So something to consider if you are going to have these up and down on a regular basis. You want to make sure those seats are far enough forward that it can do it simply. But again, 43 cubic feet, and that's probably something that you're going to want to have down at least one of these seats more often than not if you carry a lot of luggage with a lot of people. Under the hood, we have not a lot going on that's not going to be directly related to the powertrain, which in an electric vehicle, I would hope for just a little bit of extra storage. And there's a little bit of space right here. I think we could have put a cubby for that standard dual stage charging cable that comes with the vehicle. But what we do get under the hood, at least what this is part of, is a dual motor setup that gets you 615 horsepower, 650 pound-feet of torque, and that should rocket this 0 to 60 in about 3.7 seconds. But powering all of that is gonna be the battery we find under the car, rated at 102 kilowatt hours. That's what you're gonna be able to use. And that's gonna get you a rated, at least according to General Motors, about 305 miles. But that's probably gonna be on a trim like this that has those smaller wheels. If you bump up to about a 23-inch wheel, I do suspect we're gonna lose a little bit of range. But when it comes to recharging, this isn't gonna be top tier. It's gonna come in about 190 kilowatts for your DC fast charge. That's gonna be located up here on the driver's side. And that's gonna still be, for this year, a CCS combo plug. So no NACS or J3400. I expect we'll see that in the next few years, but for now, that's what we get. When it comes to charging at home, you're gonna be able to do it one of two ways. At least level 2 charging comes with the standard 11.5, that's on the lower trims, luxury and sport. If you bump up to the premium luxury or the platinum, that's gonna come standard with a 19.2 kilowatt charger, at least onboard charger. You do have to be able to push that power from your home, but you can do so with a couple GM Energy products that are also available for sale. Up here in the driver's seat, we have a lot of adjustability and functionality. So I'll start with the functions because we can heat the cushion, we can heat the entire seat, and we have ventilated seating as well, plus massage, plus 2-position memory seating, and we can also get a lot of those functions over there in the passenger seat as well. This is an 8-way adjustable seat, 4-way adjustable lumbar, and overall it is pretty comfortable. My only complaint is that it's a little bit short when it comes to the lower cushion. No extendable thigh cushion here, and I wish this might have been just a little bit longer, but the padding and support is very nice. Now, adjusting the steering wheel is going to be done via a switch, so not built into the touchscreen, which is something we see on a lot of other cars these days. Nice to have that feature built in here. And once I'm set in this position, there should be pretty good room in the back as well. Sat beside myself here in the second row, I have plenty of legroom, and more importantly for me, I have plenty of headroom as well, even though we do have this opening moonroof. So I have about maybe just an inch or two in the middle here, but I also have plenty of other ways to get comfortable. This is the 6-seat arrangement. Standard in the luxury and the sport is gonna be 7. I kind of wish we had that bench seat to take a look at today, but 6 is what you're gonna find in most of the Vistiqs out there on the lot. But everybody's gonna get to be comfortable because we have 5-way climate control in here. That means driver, passenger, that means your outboard seating, or in this case, the middle row. And then we even have climate controls for that 3rd row, all done here on an 8-inch screen that pretty much directly duplicates what we find up there in the front. We also have plenty of power, and accessing that 3rd row, even though this space is a little bit tricky to work with, is actually pretty easy. So let's go ahead and stick Nick back there because I suspect I will run out of headroom in that 3rd row.
This is the part of the video where I normally say, let me squeeze into that 3rd row and see how I fit. But actually, I'm not having to squeeze today because the Vistiq has class-leading headroom in the EV segment. So with that being said, I can fit back here and not hit my head all that much. Now, if I try to reach the headrest, which I wouldn't normally do, this is my natural seating position and I have about an inch or two to the roof. But if I lean back, that concave starts to come down to fit all the electronics for that power liftgate. Now, amenities back here are aplenty. You have your vents off to the side, as it does have that 5-zone climate control. So you can ask that 2nd row to cool it down or warm it up, and you have vents to cool you down or warm you up with that being said. Now, charging, you have USB-C, just one on each side, cup holders, leather-wrapped armrests, and to make it feel a little bit more spacious back here, not only do they have a decently sized, I would say kind of moderate size window back here, but you also have a window up in the roof that is going to be there as standard. And that definitely plays a huge role into making this 3rd row a lot more comfortable for someone of my size. Now, in terms of specs, you have about 30 inches of legroom back here, so it's not all that much, especially when you compare it to some of the competitors in this market. But with the seat being on rails, you can slide it forward and backwards. But at a moderate setting, I have plenty of room to fit back here, and with the captain seats, my left or right leg, depending on where I'm sitting, does have room to stretch out.
Hopping inside the Vistiq, even though each of the trims is going to have the same design, some of the themes are going to be just a little bit different, mostly in coloring. We were earlier in the sport model that had pretty much an all black interior. We've moved over to the premium luxury, which comes with this really nice blue, as well as some wood accenting pieces. And this blue is not just somewhere in the seat or there on the armrest. It is actually pretty much all the way throughout in this interior. So you can see it up there on the dashboard. It's down here in the center armrest. Lots of splashes of blue to really make this feel like it's a step above. Accenting this blue really nicely is going to be some of the color here for the vent. So it is just a nice bright silver, and that runs all the way across the front there for the passenger. It also is going to accent there in the door, and it's got sort of a brushed finish there. I'm not sure how well it'll come through on the camera, but that's going to highlight or encircle the controls there for your seat. And then moving farther down, we'll actually see the same kind of lighter silver accent piece there for the speaker, which is a little bit higher up in the door. As you can see, we've got some paper down there, but that's going to make for a bigger opening for the storage cubby, which just adds a little bit of practicality and also brings that speaker in more as a design piece than just something that happens to exist in that space. Opening the glove box happens from the touch screen, so once we get those open, you can see there's a decent amount of space in here, but certainly not the largest glove box. The whole dashboard itself is just a little bit thin, and that means it creates a little bit more space inside the cabin, but leaves a little bit to be desired when it comes to storage. But the main point here in the cabin is probably going to be this 33-inch display, and that runs all the way from the left of the steering wheel, basically to the passenger seat. But if you move to the infotainment section here, you can see that this is running the same kind of Google Auto system that you find in every other GM product. One of the downsides though is that in the electric models, they don't get Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. So at least it's got Google in that regard, because things like your maps are going to be the maps I expect most people are using on a regular basis. One nice thing with each and every Vistiq model is it comes with an upgraded sound system, so I guess the standard is an upgrade, and that's going to be a 23 speaker AKG system, and that does include the Dolby Atmos system, which you can play through using your Google Music, and that way you get a very different listening experience, much more of a spatial audio than just a regular sound system. And after some time behind the wheel, this is definitely a nice place to be if you enjoy it listening to your tunes. I do have to say that one thing I don't love so much is that the speaker location up here, as highlighted in silver, is a really nice accent piece, but unfortunately while you're driving it creates a bit of a reflection. So on each side of your windshield there is sort of a lighter silver accent piece up in the windshield while you're driving. As I mentioned, we're in one of the higher end trims, so the top two trims are going to come with this heads-up display and just some pretty interesting things that unfortunately I won't be able to capture on camera right now, but we'll talk about it when we get behind the wheel, because this has an augmented reality heads-up display, and I'm excited to tell you a little bit more about it. What's a little less high-tech is going to be your standard gauge cluster, but that doesn't mean that it's not highly functional. Now, if just to the left of the screen here, I can go ahead and change a couple of different layouts, including a full screen map, which I think a lot of people are going to end up using. But this way you're able to say, hey, here's how much or how little I want on the screen, including night vision, which is obviously not going to do us a whole lot of good here, but that is available or standard on the higher end trims. And the whole point here is that you get to customize your vehicle, your space, your way. And that's one of the beauties of having so much digital. You can see just below the screen there is going to be a little sensor. That's going to be for your Super Cruise, because that is standard on every single Vistiq. And moving forward, Cadillac's saying they want to make that standard on every single Cadillac model, which means every Cadillac wheel is going to have a black plastic strip up here at the top, because that's for the lighting for that Super Cruise system. Now the steering wheel design is basically a 2-spoke, and it gets a little bit button heavy and has a lot of black plastic involved, so maybe not my favorite. But on the left side here are mostly controls for things like your adaptive cruise control, engaging that Super Cruise, adjusting your follow speed, set the speed, that sort of thing. And then here is your velocity max button. The V model in Cadillacs means performance. There is not currently a Vistiq V, but this Vistiq does have a V button. So I'm curious what a Vistiq V would look like and whether or not that button would change or get removed from the standard Vistiq. Over here on the right-hand side, controls for your infotainment, things like your voice commands, changing your audio settings, volume up and down, all of those are going to be listed here. And one thing I like is that the volume up and down is a clicker instead of a scroll wheel. That one I prefer somewhere else, not the steering wheel, but I still worry about some of that black plastic being a little bit too easy to scratch. And since this is an electric model and it is a General Motors product, we also have a paddle here. This is going to be a progressive paddle to engage and increase your one-pedal drive capability, that regenerative braking, and then obviously turn signals and wipers, and then over here, your drive stalk. We're not done with screens though, because there's an 8-inch screen here in the center console, and that's going to be the controls for the climates. And there are going to be multiple climates, as you can see, front, second row, and third row, because this is a 5-zone climate control. This is also where you're going to make changes to things like your massaging seats. If I go into the door panel and I adjust the knob there just in front of the seat controls, that's going to engage my massage control, where I can change the intensity, the different kind of massage. And this screen is basically replicated there in the second row for the temperature control for the second and third row passengers. But tucked behind this, or in front of this, is going to be your phone charging mat, and it is a 2-phone mat, so lots of space for phones, but not always the easiest to access. Just getting the camera in here is kind of proof of that. You have to reach between the steering wheel and the center screen to make that function, and that's maybe not the easiest to do. There's also a little bit more storage. You'll find that forward again, so I'll drop that down here. It's a decent amount of extra space, but probably easier to access from the passenger seat than the driver's seat, and there is just a little bit of a cubby running along the side here. If you didn't want to charge your phone, that might be a good place to put it, or maybe that's where you set your keys, something like that, but a little bit of extra space never hurt anyone. Moving back up to the top of the center console, well, obviously we have two cup holders here that's currently holding the key. The volume roller is going to be located there in the center, nice and easy. And then some of the main controls, if you don't want to do everything via touchscreen, you can access some of that here. Sorry about the lighting there. It's a little bit dark. Let me see if I can help that out. Yep, there we go. So you can see some of the things you're able to access from that touch panel. And you can also control the screen with this dial, not having to reach up to the screen each and every single time. Farther back, we have our armrest. This is not an adjustable one, so it won't slide forward or backwards, but if we open it up, there's a decent amount of space here. It's a little bit of unusual space because it's nice and tall, but not terribly wide or long. Off to the left of the steering wheel, this is where some of the controls are going to be found to do things like change the display there on your gauge cluster. And then down below that, just a few more buttons. Things like your air suspension, if your model is equipped with it, like this one is, as well as some of the brightness settings and opening and closing your hatch. And then moving just up to the left in the door, that's where all of your door controls are. They're not going to be found on the seat themselves. They'll be located right up here in the door panel. Heated cushion, heated full seat, ventilated seat, that's control for your lumbar and massage. All of it located up in the door panel. Last but certainly not least, up in the ceiling, as you can see on the rear view mirror there, it's a digital rear view mirror, and we also have controls for the sunroof. So I'll go ahead and open that blind there. It's quite a large moonroof, and as we mentioned earlier, there's even a fixed panel above the third row, so everybody gets to enjoy a bit of an open air feel. Now, depending on which model of the Vistiq you get, there are going to be some differences in the driving experience, but when you put the V button on and you put your foot down, no matter which one you get, you have 615 horsepower. We tested 0 to 60 in 3.9 seconds. Cadillac says 3.7. We were in the sport model, so it had thinner tires. I don't know if that would make the difference, but either way, this thing is quick.
Yeah, the performance is really respectable for such a heavy vehicle. I mean, you're over 3 tons. That's a ton. I mean, no pun intended. That's a ton of weight to be moving at that quick of rate. Now, obviously, we didn't achieve what they are advertising, but it really depends on rate of charge. This vehicle is a little bit low, so it wasn't able to achieve the 3.9 that we got earlier with the fully charged vehicle. So like with most electric cars, it is going to be dependent on your state of charge. But nonetheless, under 4 seconds for such a heavy vehicle, pretty dang decent. But what was also really impressive was the braking. It stopped from 60 to 0, a nearly flat road, 60 to 0 in 128 feet. Now, the only vehicle I can think that got anywhere near that, if not better, was the Kia EV9. I remember seeing around 120 feet, and that is really respectable, especially for that vehicle. It's also really heavy and very large. So the performance of this is adequate for what it is. Actually, it's impressive for what it is. Let's be completely real. And what I do love about the Vistiq for the 26 model year is that it doesn't matter if you go for the nearly $100,000 one or $80,000 one, you are getting the same performance. You're getting relatively the same braking performance, although there is a trim that is optional with Brembo brakes. So you are going to see maybe possibly better stopping time, but definitely less brake fade over a long period of time. Yeah. So performance is at the forefront of what the Vistiq is as a vehicle, but it's not necessarily like groundbreaking. It's not ground shattering. It's just a overall fast 3-row family hauler. You know, you're going to get those kids to school on time, but your brakes might be a little hot at the end of the day. It's heavy. The
model that has those Brembos is the Platinum, and we didn't. Nobody, I think, got a chance to drive a Platinum today, but we did get to drive the other two, and there's a distinct difference in the tiers. So there's kind of a 2-tier vehicle layout here, and we have the less expensive and the more expensive. The luxury and the sport, those come with a standard coil suspension, and that's the first one we drove, spent a lot of time in it. And my concern was how well it was handling meant that it was going to feel real tough on some of these roads, because there are some nasty roads out here. No offense, Michigan, but I was pleasantly surprised, because not only was it really fun in the corners, but it really ate up that nasty pavement really, really well.
Yeah, for some reason, it's probably because it gets really cold out here, but there's stretches of roads 10 miles that have expansion joints every 15, 20 feet. So you really start to feel how a vehicle performs under a stressful road situation. Here in Ann Arbor, they really know how to test their vehicles. So we've seen some that there's barely any quarter panels left because of the rust falling off. So it's definitely a testing ground for most vehicles, and this is definitely passing the test. Now, the coil spring suspension, it doesn't ride all that bad. I don't think the air suspension rides all that much better. Now, that's going to be controversial, because it really just depends on your driving style, what drive mode you're in. But getting into this, I don't notice a leaps and bounds difference from that coil spring suspension. So is it worth the extra money? Me personally, I'm still not sold. The only thing I'm really sold on is how it looks when you park, because when you put this vehicle in park, the ingress and egress setting, it lowers the vehicle incredibly low. There's one at the place where we started, at the clubhouse or whatever you want to call it, and it looks like it's lowered. It looks like it's lowered aftermarket, but it's all stock. You know, there's different ride heights. At 50, 60 miles an hour, this vehicle does lower to achieve its 300 plus mile range. And then there is a not an off-road, but a snow mode that raises it up. But at most times, at its neutral setting, it's about the same ride height as your coil sprung option. So having the air suspension is going to increase the ride quality a little bit, but it's also going to give you that variability of a lower or higher, or just a different riding profile, if that makes sense. You can probably explain it maybe a little better because you're driving this one. I have not driven this air suspension one. Maybe I'll hop in the driver's seat here in a minute, but what do you think in that driver's seat?
I think the air suspension does make enough of a difference. Now, it really depends on which mode you're in, and that's the beauty of something like this, because it can tighten up the suspension or let it be a little bit loose. And that's what we're driving right now, is the comfort mode, and it really is comfortable. More so a dial up when you turn it into sport, because you and I both like to go ahead and carve some corners.
Yeah.
And in sport mode, this just locks in. Now, there's a lot of room here for there to be a V performance version.
Yeah, 100%.
But for me, especially with this much power and the way that suspension adjusts, I might make the leap just for the suspension, and that's a big leap to make. But the nice thing is you don't have to get one of the very expensive models to get a good car.
Now, Travis, one thing I just noticed as we were just turning around and doing a driver swap is how well this active rear steer functions on this vehicle. Now, I can even see it in the mirror turning that wheel, and it just maneuvers this relatively large three-row SUV around the corner or turning around to U-turn very well. Now, that is available on this trim as well as the top Platinum. Is that correct?
Yeah, so like I said, there's really kind of two tiers as far as equipment, and this definitely has it. If you do, it's not an enormous vehicle, but it does help it be a lot more maneuverable in tighter settings, but it's also going to be more useful at lower speeds than higher speeds. It'll still be there, but it operates a little bit differently.
Yeah, it just kind of gives it that extra edge to make it feel more nimble and a lot smaller than it really is. Because yes, it's not huge compared to something like an Escalade, but in comparison to some of its competitors, the three-row SUV segment, the luxury segment, this is one of the larger entries. So having that is a great feature. So not only do you get the air suspension, you get the active rear steer, and you're going to get the augmented heads-up display here, and that is interesting. So I'm currently looking at it. Obviously, it's going to be really hard to show through the
We probably
camera.
won't be able to, but if we have some footage from Cadillac themselves, we'll try and throw that in there.
Yeah, it's really a nice feature to have. So not only can you have directions on this part of the screen, you can have your whole display for your gauge cluster as directions. So there's two, and then you have play-by-play or turn-by-turn directions up on your heads-up display. So you have three different ways to know where you're going. So if you miss your turn, I mean, you're a lost hope. I mean, there's three different screens at you.
So for folks who have driven with a heads-up display before, you know that it's generally right in front of you and a little bit down. So it's just above where the dashboard ends up. But Cadillac has, in this model, a new system that has a two-tiered heads-up display. So there's the one in front of you, and then there's one out in front of you. And that's what this augmented reality one is. And it's still the same kind of turn-by-turn directions, but what it does is have items projected onto the windshield that get bigger as you get closer, and it's more interactive. So basically impossible to miss, but it feels like you're playing Mario Kart a little bit. And I don't think it's going to be to everyone's liking, but it's quick and easy to turn on and off. So it's fun that they're playing with it. And they've been working on that system for nearly 10 years to get it into this car.
And as we're talking about the heads-up display, I think it's important to note that every trim of the Vistiq is going to come standard with Super Cruise. So that's going to be, I mean, worth the money nonetheless. And then you add on all of the other things that you get, whether you go for the more expensive or cheaper trim. I think this is a fantastic vehicle. It's chock full of all the latest technology. Now, some things about Super Cruise. Cadillac says that they have over 600,000 miles mapped out. So when you look at your Google Maps, since we don't have Apple CarPlay anymore, you look at your built-in Google Maps, and it'll tell you if the road is mapped out for Super Cruise. So right now, it just blinked at me up here on the steering wheel because this is no longer mapped out. So I have to take back over control. It will kick in cruise control again if I get up to the set designated speed, but as of right now, coming up to this roundabout, it is making me take control.
There are a couple of improvements they have made to that system. One of them is the ability for the system to kind of have a general on, and then that's gonna do the best that it can in that scenario. So whether that be adaptive cruise control, hands on the wheel assist, or full super cruise, hands off the wheel assist, it's gonna be able to manage that in and of itself, where you don't have to turn things on and off at each different level. The other thing it's gonna do, as Nick just mentioned, is that it's going to make it easier for you to tell how much of your route is going to be already super cruise enabled. And so if you wanted to find the route where you had to do the least amount of the driving on your own, then you could follow those directions. It might not be the most direct way to do it, but if that's your thing, then you've got options. And this is gonna be something that we see moving forward. They are gonna have updates that roll out to other models. And I think this is what people really enjoy about a self-drive or autonomous drive or semi-autonomous driving experience, however you kind of want to categorize it, is that it gets better over time, and it's going to roll out to other models. Now, we have done quite a few miles while we're out here today, and there are a couple things that we have really enjoyed. One of those is going to be the sound system. It's a 23 speaker AKG system that comes standard on every single model, and there are a lot of speakers. Now, the Cadillac will get you, I think it's 42 or 44. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it starts,
Escalade?
the Escalade IQ, excuse me, yep, starts with a 4. This is about half of that, but I'm pretty satisfied here, and they are everywhere. They're in our headrests, they're above our head, they're in the doors, they're up front, which is maybe not my favorite location. I think I told you earlier, Nick, it gets a bit of a reflection. I don't know if you can see that one, but on a sunny day, that one might bother me a bit, but it sounds amazing.
Yeah, it is Dolby Atmos certified, so Cadillac worked with Dolby to make sure that this vehicle is tuned to perfection in terms of the sound system. Now, there's a lot that goes into that. Now, with an electric vehicle, you already have to pay very close attention to the build quality and the fit and finish to make sure there's no rattles, no creaks, no nothing coming from the vehicle, because you don't have a powertrain to drown out that noise. So they already, now that is not the vehicle, that's
our junk.
Something in the glove box. Nonetheless, they did a really good job at making sure there's a bunch of sound deadening in here, and where the speakers are placed, they're not in typical locations. Like the speaker on the door is not all the way down towards the hinge. It is more midway up the door, so you have more cargo space below it, and it also just gives a more cohesive sound profile to what you are listening to. Now, one thing I will mention about this sound system, it's not gonna knock your socks off in terms of bass. That is not what Dolby Atmos is about. What Dolby Atmos is about is having the perfect blend of the highs, lows, and the mids, and I think this vehicle perfects that. We didn't really test it out all that much. The best place to test it would be on a long road trip where you can listen to podcasts, you can listen to hip hop, EDM, jazz, and you can really start to test out the system. But what we did listen to today, I think it handled it pretty well. One thing I mentioned to Travis while listening to it and while testing is it didn't feel like the highs, so like a voice, like a female voice, it didn't sound like it was coming from the front, it didn't sound like it was coming from the back. It almost sounded like it was a complete surround sound system, and it really is impressive. So just keep in mind, it's not gonna knock your socks off in terms of bass or overall like power. It's just a very well blended kind of perfection. They didn't go for anything too much. The highs, lows, mids, there's nothing that stands out.
And the thing there that's worth noting that's a little bit unfortunate is the only way to experience the Dolby Atmos right now in these vehicles is through Amazon Music. So you have to have an Amazon Music subscription. You have to make sure the track is Dolby certified or Dolby remixed, but it's still there, and it's a nice way to enjoy the time.
But I will mention that, not to get too snobby with my sound system, but you still get Dolby Atmos quality. You're not getting the full experience if you listen to Spotify. So Travis is correct. To get the full experience, you have to go through Amazon Music, but nonetheless, it's still gonna be better than any other sound system found previously without the Dolby Atmos rating.
It's clear this car has a lot to offer, and there's quite a bit of variability depending on what you are most interested in. The question is, how much does it all cost? No matter which way you slice it, the Vistiq isn't what I would call particularly inexpensive, but there's a clear two-tier pricing structure when it comes to the 4 different trims you can get. At the base model, $79,090 is the luxury trim, and that comes pretty well equipped as standard. If you want to jump up to the dark side, that's going to be your sport model. That's about a $500 premium, and most of it is going to be accenting pieces in a darker shade instead of a lighter silver. But the next jump up is significant. At $93,590, that's what gets you into a premium luxury like we have here. And jumping up from there is the top end trim. That's a platinum, $98,190. And I don't know about you, Nick, but between those two tiers, I do tend to lean towards that Sport and the Platinum because I do kind of like the dark side look that comes along with it. And the Platinum body trim is amazing. I'd love to be able to swap that in, but I think that's a reason that they've locked that there at the top. But the packaging jump is pretty significant. There's a lot that comes with that big bump in price.
Yeah, but also you get a lot for your money. You know, you get the availability of 23-inch wheels, the air suspension, the augmented reality heads-up display, and many more features. And I think it's worth it if you are already looking in a pretty premium luxury three-row SUV segment. Now, for me personally, I don't know if I would go for the air suspension. The only thing that really is a selling point is they had another vehicle parked outside, one with air suspension, and the exit, the ingress and egress, I might be saying that wrong. The going in and out, it lowers it a lot, and it's like slammed to the ground. It looks awesome, but that might not be worth the money for me. So I don't know, me personally, I think I might go Sport as well. But let us know down in the comments what you guys think of this vehicle, because I'm interested to see what you guys think of the design, the value, and the features that come along with it, because there are some unique features like the augmented reality heads-up display that are pretty unique to this industry, and it's somewhat new technology. And I want to know what you guys have to say. My name is Nick, this is Travis for Auto Buyer's Guide, and thank you so much for watching. And until the next video, we'll see you guys then.